A millionaire CEO falls in love again after finding the woman he abandoned years ago, but this time he will have to fight hard to win her over, because now she is a completely different woman. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Logan Pierce stood at the center of the Redwood Business Conference auditorium, gazing into a sea of expectant faces. The bright lights overhead illuminated his every gesture, and the hush among the crowd signaled they were eager to hear the words of a man known for his boundless ambition. His voice had become something of a legend in the corporate world, inspiring both fear and admiration among competitors. At that moment, wearing a tailored suit and sporting the poised confidence of a self-made millionaire, he looked precisely like the powerful CEO everyone expected him to be. He began his speech in a measured tone, speaking about new market opportunities, the progression of Pierce innovations, and the forward-thinking plans he had championed. Every now and then, a ripple of applause echoed from the audience, punctuating his points. On the surface, everything seemed smooth, another routine display of Logan's compelling leadership. Yet, behind his polished smile, a slight tension gripped him. He sensed the typical swirl of corporate drama just below the surface, but for a man like Logan, that was an old familiarity, something he enjoyed controlling. Then it happened. His gaze drifted toward the back of the auditorium, just a brief glance at first. And there she was. The flash of recognition hit him like a lightning bolt. Trinity. For a second, Logan's entire world narrowed to the sight of her, standing half-hidden at the edge of a door, observing him intently. He faltered, nearly losing his train of thought mid-sentence. The applause faded. A faint murmur rippled through the audience, sensing something off in his sudden pause. For the first time in years, Logan Pierce lost his composure on a public stage. He somehow managed to finish his planned remarks, though the last few lines came out haltingly. He forced a nod and a smile, stepping back from the podium amid uncertain applause. His mind was somewhere else entirely, racing through half-forgotten memories of Trinity's laughter and her spirited energy, and, more painfully, the day he'd walked away from all of it without a backward glance. Once the crowd dispersed into the aisles, Logan made his way off the stage. A few Redwood conference organizers offered polite handshakes, congratulating him on another powerful presentation. He thanked them mechanically, his eyes already scanning for any sign of Trinity in the bustling hall. The chatter of finance moguls, startup founders, and curious journalists merged into a hum around him. Luxurious banners advertised new business solutions, while well-dressed attendees chatted over designer coffee cups, forging deals in hushed conversations. Finally, he spotted her near an exhibit booth spotlighting an innovative software platform. She stood with a small group of people, an air of confidence radiating off her. The curve of her jaw was sharper than he remembered. The sleek lines of her professional attire hinted at success in her own right. For a man accustomed to reading every negotiation in the room, Logan couldn't quite place the expression she wore. Surprise, maybe, but also something that looked like quiet resolve. He approached hesitantly. Trinity's gaze flicked to him, and for an instant he glimpsed a flash of old hurt layered beneath her outward composure. She offered him a polite nod, her voice as cool as marble when she spoke. "Logan Pierce, still commanding every room you enter," she said, raising an eyebrow in that same knowing way he remembered so vividly. His assistant, Marcus, hovered at Logan's elbow. Marcus was usually quick with a friendly grin, but the atmosphere between Logan and Trinity warned him to keep a polite distance. Logan forced a thin smile. "Trinity," he replied, "I didn't realize that you'd be here." She tilted her head, eyes flickering over his expensive suit. So many corporate events, so many industry conferences. Hard to avoid each other forever. The dryness in her tone stung more than Logan expected. He tried to appear calm, though inside he felt unsettled, the old guilt rising. "It's been a long time," he managed. "I'm sure it has," she said simply, offering no further warmth. Before he could say anything else, Vaughn Caldwell, another CEO who'd built a reputation almost as formidable as Logan's, strolled up to Trinity. Caldwell greeted her with effortless familiarity, then cast Logan a challenging glance. "Logan," he said, coolly shaking his hand, "I see you've already reconnected with Trinity. She's been a valuable advisor in my circle lately." Logan's jaw tensed. Rival CEOs with a personal edge were nothing new to him, but Vaughn's mention of Trinity as an ally unsettled him. He felt the faint prick of something akin to jealousy gnawing at him. "We're old acquaintances," he said in a clipped tone, noticing Trinity's subtle smirk at the description. Caldwell shifted to stand closer to her, as if symbolically placing himself between them. The air felt charged, like the quiet before a thunderstorm. In that moment, Logan realized that meeting Trinity again wasn't going to be a simple walk down memory lane. It was a reckoning, one he might not be prepared for. Marcus, sensing the tension, smoothly stepped in to ask Logan a question about an upcoming interview. Logan used the distraction to pull away from Caldwell. With a final look at Trinity, he nodded in goodbye, her expression too controlled to read. As he walked off, the conversation behind him resumed in hushed tones. He didn't need to hear the words to know he'd just lost the comfortable vantage point he always kept over every situation. Minutes later, he stood in a wide hallway lined with potted trees and soft lighting, trying to gather himself. The Redwood Business Conference's ambiance was the epitome of corporate luxury, designed to seal deals and flaunt power. Yet for Logan, that comfort had vanished. He felt oddly exposed. Memories of his younger self flooded his mind, that rebellious spark he once found so thrilling in Trinity, the nights they'd spent dreaming of futures bright with possibility, and the day he'd chosen to pursue success without her. He took a moment to breathe, leaning against the marble wall. Marcus joined him, wearing a concerned expression. "You're due for a meeting with potential partners soon," the assistant reminded him gently. "But is everything all right? You seemed distracted on stage." Logan nodded, brushing off the worry. "I just need a minute," he said. "I'll be fine." In truth, he wasn't sure if he was fine at all. The lingering image of Trinity's face was a jolt to his carefully constructed life, one that threatened to unravel more than just his composure. He stared into the middle distance, remembering the sparkle in her eyes back when they were both younger, hungrier for a future they believed they could shape together. He'd been so certain that leaving her behind would clear a path to unstoppable success. Now he realized he might have paid a higher cost than he ever intended. Soon, a Redwood Conference staff member ushered him back into the main corridor, where a bustle of corporate executives greeted him. The usual routine resumed: firm handshakes, quick smiles, polite small talk. But Logan's responses were on autopilot. Internally, he kept searching the crowd for another glimpse of Trinity. She'd come and gone in a matter of minutes, stirring a storm he felt powerless to calm. He finally spotted her again, standing near the exit, talking with a group of sharply dressed attendees. Her posture was confident, her smile reserved. No one would guess how complicated their history was. The moment she sensed his gaze, her eyes flicked up to meet his across the room, and a subtle tension passed between them. It wasn't anger so much as something heavier, maybe disappointment, maybe a flicker of something else, too. She broke away from the conversation, giving him a final, inscrutable look before heading for the doors. Logan took a step forward, uncertain of what to say or how to stop her. Somewhere behind him, another executive tried to capture his attention about a new product. He barely registered the question. He swallowed hard and set down the glass of water he was holding, his heart pounding. Everything he thought he knew, his place in the corporate world, his achievements, his unstoppable momentum, felt oddly hollow. An intense urge to speak to Trinity, to close the distance between them, pulsed through him. Logan pushed past a few onlookers, ignoring the curious glances. By the time he reached the exit doors, Trinity had already slipped outside into the swirl of people heading to other parts of the convention center. A dozen side hallways and a constant flow of attendees made it easy for someone to disappear. Still, he refused to give up. He stepped forward, searching desperately over the heads of departing guests. Suddenly, there she was in the crowd, pausing for a brief second as though sensing his pursuit. Their eyes locked from a distance, and Logan opened his mouth to call her name. That single moment felt like a choice point in his life, one leading toward redemption, or at least a chance to understand the woman he'd hurt. But before he could shout, the crowd shifted. A wave of people stepped between them, and he lost sight of her again. He quickened his pace, weaving around a couple in animated conversation, a group of business interns taking selfies, and a conference employee trying to hand him a promotional flyer. By the time he got close, Trinity was already on the move, her figure slipping through the exit doors. When Logan finally emerged into the grand lobby, all he saw was the faint swirl of her hair before she vanished down a corridor. He tried once more to follow, but an event security guard blocked him from leaving the designated area, politely insisting he stay within the main conference zone. By the time the guard relented, Trinity was gone. Logan paused, breathing heavily, frustration building inside. He'd never felt so uncertain, so keenly reminded of what he had thrown away. And then, in a chance moment, he caught a glimpse of her turning a corner. Their eyes met for the span of a heartbeat, and she gazed back with an expression he could only interpret as a silent dare. It was as if she were challenging him to keep chasing, to finally face the past he'd worked so hard to bury. A flicker of regret, a tiny flash of longing, then she disappeared into the crowd. Logan stared after her, pulse thudding in his ears. The conference bustle continued around him, the polished floors reflecting countless footsteps, the air buzzing with corporate ambitions. But all he could feel was the echo of her presence and the stark realization that this time he couldn't simply walk away from the past. He inhaled deeply, tightening his grip on the slim conference folder he still held, and allowed a new determination to settle inside him. Whatever it took, he would find her. He would find the words she deserved to hear. He couldn't bear another sleepless night haunted by old regrets. Not this time. Logan steps forward to call her name, but she vanishes into the crowd. The last image is Trinity glancing back as if daring him to follow, and he knows he must. Logan lingered near the double doors of the Redwood Business Conference, determined not to let Trinity vanish a second time. A rush of attendees left the auditorium, voices blending into a steady hum. He glanced at each face in the crowd, hoping to spot her dark hair or poised posture, but it was no use. She had disappeared as swiftly as she'd come. The memory of her gaze, full of old wounds and unspoken truths, weighed heavily on him. Eventually, a flustered conference coordinator approached with a stack of papers cradled in her arms. "Mr. Pierce," she said, "our VIP gala is tonight, and here's your personal invitation." Her tone sounded expectant, as though certain he would attend. Logan accepted the embossed card with a murmured thank you, scanning the details. It was a formal affair with a high-profile guest list. The coordinator added, almost as an afterthought, "Trinity will also be there." He paused, the words looping in his mind. It had taken him only seconds to lose Trinity at the auditorium, but tonight he might get the chance to speak to her properly. Maybe away from the corporate bustle, he could find a moment of genuine honesty, an apology that didn't feel like business small talk. Without further delay, he returned to his penthouse office, a tastefully modern space perched high above the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of dusk settling in, the skyline glowing with promise. Normally, Logan took comfort in this vantage point, a reflection of the power he had worked tirelessly to obtain. Yet, as he stared at the soft, fading sunlight, his thoughts drifted toward Trinity, her controlled composure, the hurt in her eyes, and all the questions he still carried about why she had shown up at the conference after so many years. Marcus knocked discreetly on the open door, stepping in. "Sir, I've finalized the details for your next few meetings, but I assume you'll want to attend the gala tonight?" His assistant's quiet voice hinted at concern. Marcus had witnessed Logan's discomposure earlier and knew something deeper was at play. "Yeah, I'll be there," Logan replied. He turned away from the window, absently adjusting his cufflinks. "I need to see her again." Though the words were matter of fact, there was an undertone of urgency he couldn't hide. Hours later, Logan found himself driving through the city at twilight, the streets awash with the golden hue of street lamps. He weaved his sleek car between lanes, mind consumed by scattered memories and fresh apprehension. Overhead, the sky slid from a hazy purple into a deeper night. He thought about the early days with Trinity, her lively ambition, her quick wit, the way she had once teased him about his unyielding focus on success. It seemed like a lifetime ago. He wondered if there was anything left of the girl who used to care for him, or if she'd buried those memories just as he had tried to do. Soon, he arrived at the grand hotel venue. Valets in neatly pressed uniforms scrambled to open car doors for an endless stream of distinguished guests. He stepped out, exuding his signature confidence in a tuxedo tailored to perfection. Flashbulbs from event photographers captured his arrival, and a small crowd of journalists hovered by the entrance, hoping to snag quotes from notable figures. The gala itself was a spectacle of opulence. Glittering chandeliers hung from a vaulted ceiling, and the polished marble floors reflected every shimmer of light. Waiters in sharp black suits offered champagne on silver trays, while elegant string music drifted across the high-ceilinged space. Logan navigated the swirl of guests, nodding politely to those who recognized him, but his thoughts were anchored on finding Trinity. He finally spotted her beside a tall display of Redwood's philanthropic initiatives. She was wearing a sleek black dress that accentuated her poised bearing. Her hair was done in a simple yet sophisticated style, and her eyes sparkled beneath the soft lights. The sight momentarily stole his breath. She appeared more self-assured than ever, a testament to the life she had built on her own. Logan approached carefully, trying not to draw too much attention. She noticed him and held his gaze with a steady look. "You followed the invitation," she commented. There was neither warmth nor annoyance in her voice, only a controlled neutrality that kept Logan guessing. "I did," he said softly. "Wanted a chance to see you again. Properly." Trinity set down her champagne glass on a passing tray. "If it's about earlier, don't apologize. Public scenes aren't my style, and it looked like you were trying not to create one." He swallowed hard. "I am sorry, though. About everything." The breadth of what everything entailed stretched far beyond a single conversation. Her silence spoke volumes, and he realized that words could only mend so much. The clink of glasses and a hush in the music signaled that something was about to happen on stage. But before the spotlight shifted, Marcus eased up behind Logan. "Sir, if you have a moment, a few potential partners would like to speak with you." His voice was low, respectful of the tension between Logan and Trinity. Logan nodded slightly, though his focus remained on her. "I'll be there soon." Marcus gave a cautious look, then disappeared into the crowd. Trinity observed all this with an almost imperceptible lift of her brow, as though expecting Logan to run off again in pursuit of the next corporate conquest. Before either of them could speak further, a journalist with a press badge hanging around his neck approached. He was a lean man with a keen, probing stare. "Logan Pierce? And Trinity Rose, correct?" His voice carried the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to digging for headlines. "You two looked deep in conversation. Care to share a quote about your history for Redwood's coverage?" Logan stiffened. "We're just discussing professional matters," he said firmly. The last thing he needed was a reporter sensationalizing his past with Trinity. Trinity, unflappable, offered a succinct half-smile. "I'm here to discuss my work. That's all." The journalist wasn't deterred. I couldn't help but notice a bit of a spark, let's say, between you both earlier. Your name came up when Ms. Rose mentioned her startup's potential partnerships. Could that involve Pierce Innovations? The directness of the question set Logan on edge. This was the first time he'd heard any hint that Trinity's business might intersect with his. He wasn't sure how to respond. "We're still exploring possibilities," he said carefully, glancing at Trinity to gauge her reaction. She kept her features controlled. "Nothing is confirmed yet," she added, dismissing the journalist's leading tone. Unsurprisingly, the reporter leaned in, sensing a potential scoop. "So there's a history. Are we talking old friends? Ex-partners, perhaps? We'd love an inside story." A flash from a camera caught Trinity's profile, and a ripple of curiosity from nearby guests made the moment even more uncomfortable. Logan saw Trinity's jaw clench. This was precisely the kind of public confrontation she had been trying to avoid. He placed an arm lightly in front of her, hoping to shield her from further intrusion. "Excuse us," he said in a cool but final tone, steering her away from the prying journalist. They ended up near a marble pillar, half concealed by tall arrangements of white lilies. He caught the faint scent of her perfume as they stopped, tension buzzing in the air. She exhaled slowly, her gaze flicking around to ensure the reporter hadn't followed. "I hate the press," she muttered. Logan gave a tight nod. "I'm sorry. They zero in on anything that looks out of the ordinary." "Right, and we certainly look out of the ordinary," she said, an edge creeping into her voice. A voice on the microphone cut through the space. The gala's host was calling for everyone's attention to announce Redwood's new philanthropic initiative. Polite applause spread through the crowd, and the music softened to a hush. For a few minutes, all eyes turned to the stage, granting Logan and Trinity a momentary reprieve. Logan seized that chance to face her directly, his expression earnest. "Trinity, about the past, there's so much I need to say to you. I'm not sure any apology would be enough, but if you'd—" She held up a hand, halting him. "Logan, I'm not interested in hashing this out in the middle of a gala. If you really want to talk, find me somewhere private. But don't expect me to just forgive everything." Her voice carried a controlled intensity. "I spent a long time learning how to live without you." A flicker of pain crossed Logan's face. "I understand. Still, She shook her head, her eyes taking on a distant quality. "I have to go. There are people I need to speak with." Without giving him a chance to respond, she turned on her heel, disappearing into the milling throng of tuxedos and gowns. He watched her retreat, words dying on his lips. The hollowness in his chest returned, mingled with a flicker of determination. Somehow, in the swirl of champagne glasses and fleeting conversations, the weight of their unfinished past felt heavier than ever. He knew their next conversation would be pivotal, and the uncertainty of it gnawed at him. As the night wore on, Logan tried to engage in polite networking and greet familiar faces, but he couldn't shake the sight of Trinity's guarded expression. He felt an odd mixture of shame and longing. When the gala eventually drew to a close, waiters began collecting empty glasses, and groups of attendees said their goodbyes. Logan found himself by the grand staircase scanning for her one last time, but she was nowhere to be seen. He made his way through the exit, stepping out into the cool night air. A few paparazzi still lingered near the entrance, snapping photos of departing guests. Logan ignored them, fishing for his phone to request his car. Just then, the device buzzed in his hand with a new message from an unknown number. At first, he considered ignoring it. Anonymous tips and spam messages were not uncommon for someone in his position, but something compelled him to read it. The brief text made his pulse kick. Trinity might be hiding a major personal secret. Logan stared at the glowing screen, a sudden rush of alarm washing over him. He reread the message, trying to make sense of it. What could this possibly be referring to? She'd shown no indication of personal skeletons, aside from the obvious tension between them. And yet, the words made him recall the storm of thoughts in her eyes, the way she'd held herself with such quiet determination. Maybe there was more to her story than he ever realized. Standing at the curb, Logan felt the weight of the unknown settle on his shoulders. He glanced around as if he might catch one more glimpse of Trinity stepping from the venue. There was only the last stragglers of the gala, none of them her. The swirl of city lights reflected off the glossy pavement, and somewhere in the distance, a horn blared. He tucked his phone into his pocket, mind reeling. A secret? If it was true, how deep could it go? Or was this just a cruel trick by a meddling rival? The fact that his heart pounded so violently told him that even if the tip was vague, it was enough to put him on edge. He looked out into the shimmering night, remembering her earlier glance, a look that held defiance, sorrow, and maybe a flicker of old affection. Now, the only question was whether he dared to find out what she'd been hiding all this time. As Trinity exits, a text buzzes on Logan's phone. An anonymous tip that Trinity might be hiding a major personal secret. Logan's eyes flash with alarm. He wonders, what is she keeping from me? Logan set down the phone on his desk, the anonymous text still replaying in his mind. The words suggested that Trinity was hiding something far more complicated than he ever imagined. He glanced out of the massive windows in his office, trying to clear the swirl of speculation from his head. The city lights glowed in the distance, and though his reflection in the glass was as composed as ever, his stomach churned with a rare sense of unease. He paced around the office, retracing every interaction he'd had with Trinity since her sudden appearance. She had been guarded, certainly resentful, and no wonder. He'd walked out of her life years ago with barely a backward glance. Still, something in her eyes now hinted at a deeper layer of secrecy. He recalled the text. Trinity might be hiding a major personal secret. Despite his usual caution against rumor and gossip, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was truth behind it. Marcus, his loyal assistant, entered quietly. "Sir, I've noticed you've been distracted," he said. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Logan considered brushing him off but changed his mind. "I need information," he said, "about Trinity Rose, anything that might have changed in her life these past few years." Marcus hesitated, sensing the sensitivity of the request. "All right, I'll see what I can find through public channels. But if she's been keeping a low profile, it may take time." Logan nodded, his gaze returning to the window. "I understand." That night, he left the office with an urgency he usually reserved for closing deals or finalizing acquisitions. He found himself unable to rest. His mind hopped from one possibility to the next. Old regrets swirled alongside the mystery of Trinity's life. Finally, just before dawn, he dozed off on the sofa in his penthouse living room, only to be startled awake by an early phone call from Marcus. "I have a possible lead," Marcus said. "There's an old newspaper clipping from a local news site upstate. It's dated around 2.5 years ago, mentioning Trinity, something about a fundraiser, and it references 2 children. Logan's heart rate spiked. "Children?" he repeated, gripping the phone more tightly. "Are you certain?" "It's not much," Marcus admitted, "but the article specifically said she was recognized at a charity event, and the piece mentioned she was a devoted mother of twins. I don't have their names, and there aren't any photos attached. It could be a coincidence, but the timing and details match her age and background." Logan felt a cold weight settle in his chest. His mind spun to the years they'd been apart, working through the timeline. If these twins were Trinity's children, how old would they be? And if they were a certain age, could they be? He ended the call with a quick thanks, then sat in silence. The building traffic outside indicated the city was waking up, but for Logan, it felt like the world was shrinking to the size of a single question. Were those kids his? The very idea sent a tremor of shock through him. He remembered how he and Trinity had once talked about a future. They'd been so certain that life was something they could conquer together, until he had chosen a path fueled by ambition and left her behind. Without overthinking, He grabbed his car keys and headed out. He knew Trinity worked at a newly established startup office on the other side of town, a detail he'd picked up from the Redwood Business Conference pamphlets. He could have called first, but it felt too urgent, too personal. He needed to see her face to face. Traffic crawled along congested avenues, every red light stoking his impatience. By the time he parked in front of a modest yet modern building with glass walls and a minimalist sign, he was practically leaping out of his seat. Inside, the receptionist gave him a polite smile. "Good morning. Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Trinity Rose," he said. "Is she available?" The receptionist checked the schedule. "She's in a meeting, but I can let her know you're here." Logan handed over his business card. The receptionist disappeared into a side corridor. Moments later, Trinity stepped into the lobby, professional as ever. She wore a crisp blouse with a neutral tone, her posture radiating confidence. Yet the moment she saw Logan, a wave of tension flashed across her face. "I wasn't expecting you," she said. "Can we talk?" His voice sounded strained to his own ears. Her eyes flicked to the receptionist, still hovering nearby. "Follow me." She led him down a narrow hallway and into a small, glass-walled conference room with a frosted decal on the door. Once inside, she closed the door behind them. "What is it?" she asked, crossing her arms. "Because the last time you tried to talk, I told you I didn't want a scene." Logan exhaled slowly. "I got a tip," he said. "Someone said you have a secret. Then my assistant found a reference." He paused, uncertain how to phrase such a monumental question without sounding accusatory. "A reference to you being a mother of twins." Trinity's expression hardened, but her voice remained calm. "I don't see how that's any of your business. Are they my children?" he asked, voice faltering at the last two words. He'd come this far, and the only path left was honesty. She stared at him, her lips pressed into a taut line. For a moment, he thought she might deny it outright, but then something in her eyes wavered, a flicker of the pain she had kept buried. "Yes, they are," she said softly, each syllable landing like a revelation. Logan's knees almost buckled. He took a step back, his breath catching in his chest. I didn't know. Why didn't you ever—" "I tried," she said, voice cracking slightly. "I tried to reach you in the beginning, but you were already gone. And from that moment on, it became clear you'd chosen your path. I wasn't going to chase you down." Stunned, he sank into one of the conference room chairs. He tried to imagine the magnitude of her experience raising twins alone while he was off building an empire. "Trinity, if I'd known, would it have changed anything?" she asked, eyes flashing with anger. "You left me for your corporate dreams. You didn't answer my calls or my letters. I got the message loud and clear." He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Guilt weighed him down like a physical force. "I'm sorry," he managed at last. "I was foolish and ambitious. I thought I knew what I wanted out of life, but I never imagined it would cost me everything we had." Trinity took a seat opposite him, her voice turning raw with years of pent-up emotion. "You can't just barge in now and play the remorseful father. They're not babies anymore. They're 4 years old and they know nothing about you." She drew in a shaking breath. "I built a life for them. I protected them." His mind reeled. "They're 4, he repeated, trying to absorb the fact that he had 2 children walking and talking somewhere in this city. "What are their names?" She hesitated, as if the question itself was too intimate, too personal for the man who'd abandoned her. "Sienna and James," she finally said, her voice softening momentarily at the mention of them. Logan closed his eyes, letting the names sink in. An ache unfurled in his chest, regret, wonder, and an inexplicable longing to see them. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said. "I was selfish and naive, but I'm here now, and I want to make things right." Trinity's lip trembled. "You can't just fix this overnight. For 4 years they've had no father. You don't get to stroll in and expect a family. He swallowed hard. I understand I can't just claim that role, but please, let me at least know them, be part of their lives somehow. I've made mistakes, but I don't want to repeat them. She studied him with a mixture of anger and sadness. I can't promise you anything, she said at last. I need time to think about what this means for me and the kids. I won't let anyone hurt them, especially not you, if you decide to bail again. Never, Logan said. I won't leave again. Silence settled between them, tense and heavy with the weight of 4 lost years. Through the glass walls, Logan could see employees at their desks, the hustle of startup life continuing beyond this small space. It felt surreal that so monumental a conversation could happen amid the ordinary hum of an office. Then Trinity stood, gesturing toward the door. I need to get back to work. She paused, lowering her voice. I have a client meeting in a few minutes. We can talk again, but not here, not now. I'll let you know when. Logan rose, the shock of his new reality still coursing through his veins. Thank you, he said quietly, for telling me. She offered a single nod, her face revealing none of her inner turmoil. He watched her walk away, the glass door closing softly behind her. Even in that moment, he felt the distance that years of pain and distrust had built. Yet there was also a flicker of possibility, though whether it was for closure or a second chance, he couldn't be sure. Shaken, he left the building, stepping into the bright daylight. His phone began to buzz in his pocket, and he glanced at the screen. The caller ID showed one of his board members, someone who rarely called without urgent business. He answered, his voice still faintly trembling from the confrontation. Logan, said the board member on the other line, sounding harried. We've got an emergency situation. We need you at the office, immediately. Emergency? Logan repeated, forcing himself to focus. It's a crisis. If we don't act now, your position as CEO could be at risk. Logan's grip on the phone tightened. I'll be there soon, he replied. He ended the call but couldn't move just yet. Everything felt like it was spinning out of control, from the shock of discovering 2 children he never knew he had, to the crisis threatening to uproot his company. And amid it all, he couldn't shake the lingering image of Trinity's tear-filled eyes, filled with anger and heartbreak, or the undeniable reality that he was a father who had yet to meet his own kids. Logan steps outside, phone buzzing again, this time from a board member. The urgent voice demands his presence for a critical emergency meeting that threatens his CEO position. But Logan can't shake the image of Trinity's tear-filled eyes, or the fact that he has 2 children he's never met. Logan arrived at Pierce Innovations early in the morning, feeling the weight of everything that had transpired in the last 24 hours. He was still reeling from Trinity's revelation. He had 2 children he'd never met, and the stark reality of fatherhood had struck him harder than any boardroom battle. Yet there was no time to process those emotions now. The board had summoned him in haste, hinting at a crisis that threatened not just his reputation, but the very foundation of the company he had built. Stepping out of the elevator onto the executive floor, he noticed an unusual hush. Assistants whispered in clusters, and worried expressions passed over every face that glimpsed him. It was as though news of his personal turmoil had already begun to leak, mingling with the larger corporate storm everyone seemed to sense. Logan clenched his jaw and strode down the corridor, determined to maintain his composure. In the boardroom, 6 directors were already seated, each with files spread before them and stressed lines on their brows. Harding, one of the more outspoken members, was flipping through a thick packet of documents. At the head of the table, Ms. Kwan, an influential investor whose funding was critical to an upcoming project, sat with an air of impatience. The moment Logan entered, all eyes locked onto him. "Glad you could join us, Mr. Pierce," Harding said, in a voice that dripped with more irony than welcome. "We have several urgent matters to address today." Logan took his seat, resisting the urge to snap back. "So I gather," he replied, scanning the tense faces around him. "Fill me in." Ms. Kwan exhaled sharply. I'm concerned about the direction of Pierce Innovations' new product line. We've sunk millions into a contract that relies on advanced software capabilities we were told would be secured by now. But negotiations have stalled, and investors are getting skittish. Harding nodded in agreement. The problem is that the competitor, Caldwell Corporation, seems to be courting the same tech partners. If they lock those contracts first, our entire deal will be compromised. We need a firm plan, and we need it now. Logan sifted through his mental map of potential partnerships. He knew about the Redwood Lead, the experimental AI startup out west, and a few other prospects. Yet, in the back of his mind, he kept recalling Trinity's mention of her own startup's capabilities. Had she hinted at any synergy with Pierce Innovations? They hadn't had time to discuss specifics. Still, he wondered if she might be exactly the link he needed, on a professional front at least. He cleared his throat. I'm aware of Caldwell's moves, and we're not going to let him outmaneuver us. Our R&D department has been exploring new synergy opportunities. I'll have more concrete details soon. Ms. Kwan's brow furrowed. It better be soon, or I'll have no choice but to consider withdrawing my investment. We can't afford hesitation. The board erupted in a low murmur. Logan felt the mounting pressure, made heavier by his personal crisis. He pressed his palms flat on the polished table. Give me a short window to finalize a partnership. I promise we'll lock this down. After the meeting adjourned, Logan retreated to his corner office. The walls, usually so reassuring in their sleek, modern design, felt oppressively close. Marcus entered soon after, looking uncomfortable. Sir, the rumors about your personal matters, they're spreading. Some staff members are concerned that your attention might be divided. Logan frowned. Wonderful. As if the board's tension wasn't enough. He paused, taking a breath. Marcus, I need your help. Do we have any promising leads on smaller, innovative tech firms? Marcus shifted on his feet, scanning through his tablet. Well, there are a few interesting proposals here. Also, Trinity's startup. It's gaining attention from major players, even Caldwell. Her team has developed something that could fit the kind of software solutions we need. Logan nodded, heartbeat accelerating. Set up a meeting with her, soon as possible. If Caldwell is courting the same opportunity, we can't let him corner the market. Marcus shot him a cautious look. Personal complications aside, do you think Ms. Rose would be open to collaborating? That's what we'll find out, Logan said, feeling a surge of determination. He couldn't avoid Trinity forever, especially not with an opportunity that might save his company from a disastrous contract failure. A few hours later, Trinity walked through the glass doors of Pierce Innovations, flanked by two members of her startup team. She wore a sharp blazer, her posture exuding the same confidence he'd seen at the Redwood conference. The only trace of tension was in her eyes. Logan stood to greet her, conscious of every curious glance from his staff. For a moment their gazes locked, a silent acknowledgement of what simmered between them. Ms. Rose, Logan said formally, extending a hand. She shook it with equal detachment. Mr. Pierce, she replied, my team and I appreciate the invitation, though we did wonder why the sudden interest. He gestured toward a small conference room near his office. Once they were all seated, Marcus made the introductions and quickly recapped the potential synergy that might exist between Pierce Innovations and Trinity's firm. The discussion moved swiftly into technical details. One of Trinity's colleagues, a young woman with bright eyes, described how their software could seamlessly integrate with Pierce's new product line. Logan listened, forcing himself to stay focused on the professional aspects. Yet, in the back of his mind, he remembered the whirlwind revelation that Trinity's children were also his. The knowledge colored every glance he cast in her direction. She, however, remained the picture of composure, addressing every question with calm expertise. We see a strong possibility for collaboration, Trinity said, finally turning her full attention on him. But I need assurances, fair terms, No hidden clauses that allow Pierce Innovations to swallow up my startup. Logan knew this was about more than just business. She was testing his integrity, making it clear that trust did not come easily. "We want an equal partnership," he said, meeting her gaze. "A merger of talents that benefits both our companies. Nothing more." Harding, who had joined the meeting, coughed pointedly. "We have to consider the board's stance. We'd need an exclusivity period if we're sharing key intel. We can't have Ms. Rose's team take the same tech to Caldwell." Trinity's jaw tightened. "So you're suggesting a partnership that keeps me from exploring other options?" "During the development phase, yes," Harding said. "It's standard practice in joint ventures, but of course we'd offer a competitive rate and a seat at the table." Trinity leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "I'm fine with exclusivity, as long as our autonomy is respected. I won't tolerate any attempts to overshadow my own company's growth." Logan intervened gently, sensing rising friction. "That's not our intention. We can draft the partnership terms so your company retains its identity. We need your innovation, Trinity, and we're willing to respect your boundaries." For the next hour, they hammered out preliminary clauses. It was intense, but everyone managed to find common ground. Logan noticed that as the negotiation proceeded, Trinity's stance softened. A flicker of respect seemed to pass between them, at least on a professional level. By the time the papers were drafted for further review, Harding looked relieved, and Marcus could barely hide his optimism. As the meeting concluded, Trinity gathered her notes. "I'll take this back to my legal team," she said. "If all goes well, we can finalize the terms next week." Logan followed her out into the hallway, wanting a private word. "Thank you," he began quietly, once their colleagues had dispersed, "for giving this a shot." She gazed at him, eyes flicking over his face. "I'm doing what's best for my company," she said, her tone brisk, though not entirely cold. "And I suppose if it benefits yours as well, that's fine." He struggled for the right words, unsure if it was wise to bring up anything personal here. "I know I can't change the past, but I'd like to earn your trust in some way." Her expression remained guarded. "We'll see how things go." She turned to leave but paused. "I'll be in touch." A slight nod of acknowledgement. Then she headed toward the elevator. Before she could step inside, Ms. Kwan emerged from a side corridor, intercepting Trinity with a gracious smile. "Ms. Rose, I just wanted to say how impressive your proposal was. If you move forward with Pierce Innovations, it could really put both of you at the forefront of the tech scene." The investor directed a pointed glance at Logan. "Don't let him push you around." Trinity arched an eyebrow, and Logan felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I can handle myself, Ms. Kwan, but thank you for the concern." A flicker of amusement crossed the investor's features. "I'm sure you can." She gave a polite nod and vanished down the corridor, her interest obviously piqued by Trinity's potential role in saving the upcoming deal. Alone again, Logan and Trinity exchanged an awkward glance. "Welcome to my life," he said quietly, "always under a microscope." Her lips twitched in the barest hint of a smile. "That's the corporate world," she replied, stepping into the elevator. "Goodbye, Logan." He watched the elevator doors close, feeling an odd surge of hope. Their relationship was painfully complicated, but for the first time, it seemed they might be on the same side, at least in terms of business. Maybe that was a start. His optimism was short-lived, however, when an unexpected beep from his phone signaled a text. Caldwell's name flashed on the screen, asking for a private meeting to discuss recent developments. Logan sensed trouble. Caldwell's presence in any conversation involving Trinity or Pierce Innovations usually spelled manipulation. Yet a few days later, Trinity reappeared, confirming that her legal team was open to the partnership. The board's tension eased. Ms. Kwan seemed cautiously satisfied. For one shining afternoon, it looked like Pierce Innovations was back on solid footing. In a small ceremony, the two teams agreed in principle to collaborate, finalizing the details to be signed soon. Just as they seal their fragile alliance, Trinity receives a call. One of the twins is in the hospital with a minor emergency. She rushes out, leaving Logan stunned. He's desperate to help, but she clearly doesn't trust him yet. From the moment Trinity's distressed voice faded down the hallway, Logan could focus on nothing else. She had answered her phone, turned pale, and whispered that one of the twins was in the hospital. Before he could even process the words, she was gone, leaving him alone in the conference room with half-signed documents and a sudden painful sense of helplessness. He glanced at the clock on the wall, fighting an urge to chase after her and demand to know where she was going. What was wrong? But he knew he had no right. She didn't trust him yet, and the lines between them were still unsteady at best. An uneasy tension clung to the air. Outside the door, staff members scurried about, aware that something unexpected had happened. Marcus slipped in and saw the confusion etched on Logan's face. "She just left?" Marcus asked softly. Logan nodded. "Her child, one of them, is in the hospital." His voice was uneven, the reality of having children he'd never met still a jarring thought. "I need to do something, but she didn't exactly invite me." Marcus hesitated, then placed a hand on Logan's shoulder. "Maybe it's best to give her space. She'll reach out if she wants you there." Logan clenched his jaw. He had always been a man of action, unafraid to take control. Now he felt powerless, unsure if he had the right to involve himself in an emergency that should have been equally his to worry about. He swallowed hard. Yeah, space. Yet he couldn't concentrate. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of phone calls and urgent emails. Ms. Kwan was already demanding updates on the partnership, threatening to pull out if the final contract with Trinity's startup wasn't signed soon. Harding, that ever-persistent voice of skepticism on the board, questioned Logan's priorities behind closed doors. Staff whispered about how their usually unflappable CEO seemed oddly distracted, pacing his office instead of delivering definitive orders. By late afternoon, Logan couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his car keys and walked out, ignoring curious glances from the employees he passed. He needed air, needed to move, if not toward a solution, then at least toward clarity. In his luxury sedan, he navigated through the congested streets, lost in a storm of uncertainty. Thoughts of the hospital consumed him. He barely knew which one. Trinity had never given him details about the twins, no addresses or specific routines. For the first time in his life, being the powerful CEO of Pierce Innovations didn't give him any advantage. He was just a man realizing how distant he had become from the only family that truly mattered. A few hours later, as dusk settled, he was back in his penthouse, pacing the living room in restless circles. He tried working through strategies on his phone, exploring expansions, analyzing budgets, anything to stop imagining a hospital corridor where Trinity stood alone, comforting a sick child that was also his. Yet, no matter how hard he tried to concentrate, guilt gnawed at him. By the time night descended and city lights twinkled outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Logan sank onto his sofa in defeat. The entire day had slipped by without any word from Trinity. An ominous silence weighed on him. He was still staring at the dark skyline when his phone chimed. Instantly alert, he snatched it up, disappointment spiking when he saw it was Ms. Kwan instead of Trinity. "I'm pulling out of this if we don't finalize the deal soon," Ms. Kwan said bluntly. "I won't invest in a company that can't prioritize its key negotiations. You told me the partnership with Trinity's startup was practically sealed. Now I hear delays, half-signed contracts, personal emergencies. My patience is wearing thin." "Please, just give me until tomorrow evening," Logan implored, swallowing his pride. "There's a family matter involved. I'll have everything settled soon." Ms. Kwan paused, then replied with the same clipped tone. "Tomorrow. No more excuses." She ended the call, leaving Logan staring at the blank phone screen. He rubbed his temples, frustrated beyond measure. The image of Trinity's stricken expression floated back to him, fueling a flicker of shame. Despite Ms. Kwan's demands, Logan knew that nothing was more important than what was unfolding with Trinity and the kids. But if he didn't salvage this deal, Pierce Innovations would suffer a major blow, and that would sabotage the very collaboration he was trying to forge with Trinity's company. Everything felt like it was collapsing simultaneously. An idea formed in his mind, however impulsive. He could at least find out which hospital they'd gone to by calling around. It might be an overstep, but desperation won out. Within minutes, he was making discreet inquiries to local hospitals under the guise of a concerned family member. He was met with either confusion or refusal to disclose patient information. Each dead end heightened his sense of anxiety. At long last, in the late evening, the phone vibrated. This time, Trinity's name flashed on the screen, sending his heart hammering. He answered on the first ring. Her voice was low, edged with both exhaustion and caution. "He's okay," she began, as though she knew that was the first question in his mind. "It was an allergic reaction. Scary, but the doctors say he'll be fine." Logan exhaled shakily, relief washing over him. "Thank God." "Which—" He paused, the words sticking in his throat. "Which one?" "My son," she said. "His name is James." She hesitated a moment. "He'll stay overnight for observation, but he's stable now." Logan swallowed, fighting back a rush of emotions. "Can I come see him? Or at least sit with you? I'd like to help." The silence that followed felt unbearably long. At last, Trinity sighed. "Not tonight. We're both exhausted, and I don't want him even more confused. He's never met you, Logan." A wave of guilt and disappointment crashed over him. "I understand," he said quietly. "If there's anything you need, anything at all." She didn't respond to that offer. Instead, she let out a weary breath. "Look, I'm sorry if it messed up the negotiations. Sienna is with a neighbor tonight, and I've been balancing 1,000 calls from your board about the contract. It's overwhelming." "Don't worry about the contract. Focus on James," Logan said, meaning every word. "We'll figure out the business side later." He heard rustling on her end, perhaps the sound of hospital machinery humming faintly in the background. "All right," she murmured. "Good night, Logan." The line went dead, leaving him to stare at the phone in his hand. Relief that James was okay mingled with the acute reminder that he had no real role in his children's lives yet. It was painful, but the knowledge that they'd averted a major health scare allowed him to breathe a bit easier. At least now he knew the boy's name, James, and the girl, Sienna. Simple facts he should have known years ago. By the next morning, Logan was back in the thick of corporate demands. Ms. Kwan arrived unexpectedly at Pierce Innovations, pressing for a demonstration of how the partnership with Trinity would directly benefit her investment. Meanwhile, Harding and other board members rattled on about timelines, charts, and potential fallback plans if Trinity's startup pulled out. Surrounded by the swirl of urgent conversations, Logan struggled to maintain his calm. As they debated strategy, all he could see was the mental image of a hospital ward, where Trinity sat next to a small boy who probably wondered why his mother looked so worried. Logan forced himself to address each demand from Ms. Kwan with the same intensity he'd once brought to every major negotiation. Despite his personal crisis, he couldn't let the deal fall apart. If it did, both companies would suffer, and so would any fragile bridge he was attempting to build with Trinity. Afternoon slipped into evening before he finally got word that James had been discharged, resting at home now. Trinity texted only brief updates. She had no time to chat about business or, it seemed, about their delicate personal situation. The sense of distance between them felt heavier than ever, but Logan told himself patience was key. That night, exhausted from a day of high-stakes meetings and emotional turmoil, he returned to his penthouse. The city lights glittered outside his windows, beckoning like 1,000 silent witnesses to his predicament. He changed into more comfortable clothes, ignoring the unopened stack of financial reports on the coffee table. Sleep seemed impossible, so he stared at the skyline, wondering if Trinity and the twins were sleeping or if James was still shaken by the day's events. His phone beeped suddenly, jarring him from his thoughts. He reached for it, heart thudding when he saw Trinity's name. The text was short but charged. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. Alone." His heart thunders, uncertain if this meeting will bring reconciliation or the final cut. Logan arrived at the city park just before sunset, the sky still streaked with soft orange and pink. He'd chosen a bench near a tall oak tree, half hidden from the main path. The stillness around him felt like an echo of his own tension. A jogger passed by, footsteps tapping rhythmically on the paved walkway, and a couple strolled in the distance. Yet to Logan, everything else faded as he watched for Trinity. When she finally appeared, he felt a pull in his chest that was both relief and trepidation. She wore a light jacket, her hair loosely pinned back. She paused a few feet away, surveying the quiet spot he'd chosen. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the hush underscoring how far from casual this meeting truly was. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing to greet her. She nodded. "You said you wanted to talk alone, and I do too." Her voice carried a restrained calm, as if she'd rehearsed her composure. "James is recovering well, by the way." Logan's shoulders relaxed with genuine relief. "I'm glad to hear it. How's Sienna handling everything?" "She's fine," Trinity said. "Curious why her brother got extra attention, but I promised her it was just until he felt better." A slight smile touched her lips, and for an instant, Logan glimpsed the woman he used to know, warm, caring, brimming with quiet strength. He gestured for her to sit on the bench, and they settled at opposite ends, maintaining a careful distance. The sounds of rustling leaves filled the silence. "I want to help," he began, voice soft. "Not just with medical bills or anything material, but actually be there, if you'd let me." Trinity looked away, her eyes following a pair of children on bicycles at the far edge of the park. "I don't doubt your sincerity," she said, "but it's not as simple as dropping into their lives. They barely know you exist. If I suddenly say, 'This is your father,' they might feel betrayed that I kept you a secret." He swallowed the sting of her words. "I understand. I'm the one who caused this gap in the first place. Still, I want to fix what I can." Her gaze shifted to him. "How do I know you won't prioritize your corporate ambitions the moment a crisis hits Pierce Innovations?" A note of bitterness crept into her voice. "Everything I've built, I did alone. I won't risk letting you into the kids' lives just so you can leave again." Logan exhaled slowly. "You have every right to doubt me, but I'm trying to change. Not just for you, for them, and for myself." Before Trinity could respond, footsteps approached behind them. A figure materialized, a man in a tailored suit stepping out from the shadows of a nearby tree. Logan recognized Vaughn Caldwell immediately, his polished confidence radiating in every stride. Caldwell offered a thin, knowing smile. "Fancy seeing you two here," Caldwell said, voice dripping with forced civility. "Discussing business or something more personal?" Trinity bristled. "This is a private conversation, Vaughn. Why are you following me?" Caldwell lifted his shoulders in a casual shrug. "I was out for a walk. Sometimes business matters can be discussed in the open air, you know." He glanced at Logan, eyes gleaming with challenge. "I heard rumors that your partnership is nearly finalized, but Trinity, you should be careful. Merging your startup with Pierce Innovations might be a risky move." Logan's jaw tightened. He rose from the bench, stepping between Trinity and Caldwell. "We're well aware of the risks and rewards. If you're here to stir trouble—" Caldwell raised a hand, feigning innocence. "Logan, I'm just being a concerned friend. Trinity knows I've always admired her drive. I wouldn't want to see her overshadowed by a bigger corporation that might swallow her project or, worse, fail to deliver its end of the deal if certain personal distractions come into play." Trinity stood up. That's enough, Vaughn. I can handle my own affairs. And if I recall, you've tried to poach me before. More than once. He smirked. Yes, and I still believe your startup could do better without being tethered to Pierce. But, he added, turning to Logan, since you two clearly have a complicated history, maybe the emotional ties will keep it together, at least until something else falls apart. Logan clenched his fists. Don't you have your own company to run? Caldwell met Logan's glare with a cool stare. Indeed I do. But let's be real. If I manage to secure the same tech partnership you're after, Pierce Innovations will be left scrambling to fulfill certain high-stakes promises. Miss Kwan's investment might look quite appealing to me instead. Trinity let out a frustrated breath. You came here just to gloat, didn't you? To remind us you're a threat. Caldwell's smile broadened. Threat is such an ugly word. Let's say I'm a competitor with a better strategy, though I suppose we'll see who stands at the top once the dust settles. He gave them both a mocking half-bow. Enjoy your evening. Without another word, he turned and strolled down the path, his figure soon swallowed by the dimming light. Logan stared after him, anger roiling in his gut. Trinity let out a disbelieving laugh. I can't believe he stooped to following me around. He must be desperate to sabotage us, both personally and professionally. Logan sat back down on the bench, trying to calm the surge of adrenaline. We need to be ready. He's definitely aiming to block our partnership or turn your startup to his advantage. She hesitated a moment before sitting next to him again. Vaughn's not the problem right now. The real issue is whether we can trust each other because he'll keep exploiting every doubt, every crack. Logan nodded, jaw clenched. I hear you, and I agree. We need a united front, at least in business. Caldwell is waiting for one sign of weakness to strike. Trinity studied him. In that case, we finalize our contract. We make sure Ms. Kwan, your board, everyone sees we're serious about moving forward. If Caldwell tries anything, we show we're stronger together. Her eyes flickered with determination, then softened. This doesn't mean I'm letting you into my personal life without caution, but it's a start. A wave of relief washed over Logan. That's all I'm asking. A chance to prove I won't let you down again. They spoke for a few more minutes, hashing out a plan to expedite legal paperwork and reassure investors. The conversation held a tense undercurrent of the unspoken truth that their arrangement served mutual corporate goals, while the emotional side of it all remained a tangle of uncertainty. Still, in those moments of practical partnership, they discovered a tenuous synergy, one grounded in necessity perhaps, but also in an unspoken wish to find common ground. Finally, Trinity stood. The sky had darkened, and the overhead lamps cast pools of golden light around the park. We should go, she said, glancing toward the path Caldwell had vanished down. I don't trust him, and I'd rather not give him another chance to corner us in some public ambush. Logan rose, joining her under the nearest lamppost. A strange sense of camaraderie wove between them as they stepped onto the main walkway, even if they walked side by side without touching. I'll keep you posted about any developments at Pierce Innovations, he promised, and let me know if Caldwell tries to undercut you again. She nodded. Same goes for you. We can't let him manipulate the narrative. They paused by the park entrance where the city's traffic roared in the background. We'll talk again soon, she said quietly, as though acknowledging that each step forward in business might push them closer to confronting the deeper issues. Logan hesitated, wanting to say something about the children, about the raw hope he felt. But the moment seemed too fragile. He simply gave a small nod and watched as she crossed the street to her car. It felt like a subtle shift, neither exactly friendly nor outright antagonistic. The last glimmer of daylight vanished, replaced by neon glow from a nearby billboard. Logan couldn't stop himself from looking back once more, half expecting Caldwell to re-emerge. But the sidewalk was empty, the hush of the city evening settling in. That night, as Trinity returned to her startup's office to catch up on work, she nearly tripped over a small package lying near her door. Its plain exterior carried no postage stamp, just her name scrawled in neat, blocky letters. She picked it up, frowning. Inside, she found an envelope labeled in bold letters, Pierce's Secrets. Her heart pounded as she carefully slid out a few pages. The text detailed an old corporate deal, one she recognized as the basis for the downfall she'd faced years ago, forcing her out of town. And there, in black and white, was Logan's signature, alongside terms that all but confirmed his involvement in the worst turning point of her life. Shocked, she laid the documents on her desk and snapped a quick photo, her hands trembling. If these pages were authentic, it meant Logan had played a part far more damaging than she'd ever realized. It wasn't just a simple betrayal of walking away, it was a formal decision that had impacted her career and future. Could it be possible he'd never known the full extent? Or had he hidden it from her all along? Thoughts spiraled as she typed a brief message to Logan, attaching the image of the documents. Whatever fragile trust they'd begun to build might collapse under the weight of this revelation. Yet she couldn't keep it to herself. If they were going to move forward in any capacity, she needed the truth. Trinity receives a mysterious envelope delivered to her startup, labeled Pierce's Secrets. She texts Logan a photo of its contents, a damning document implicating him in a decision that once forced her out of town years ago. Logan stared at the photo on his phone, blood pounding in his ears. The image showed several pages of an old contract, the text partially highlighted by Trinity's phone camera. He recognized his own signature at the bottom, though the specific clauses and date triggered only the faintest memories. Above it, bold letters detailed terms that looked eerily like the ones that had driven Trinity out of their hometown years ago. He read her short message again, each word crackling with betrayal. So this is the real reason everything fell apart? You signed off on it? He slumped into his office chair, a cold dread swirling in his gut. Could it really be that he had once approved a deal that wrecked Trinity's early career, without ever realizing she'd been caught in the crossfire? Or worse, had he known and simply not cared enough at the time? The possibility churned in his mind. He wanted to deny it, to say it couldn't be true. But there, in the photo, was his signature. A knock on the door jolted him. Harding, that ever-critical board member, poked his head in. "We've all heard the latest rumors," Harding said grimly. "This Pierce's Secrets nonsense. Care to explain?" Logan set his phone aside. "It's an old contract, something I must have approved back when I first took over as CEO. It's complicated." Harding stepped in, closing the door behind him. Complicated or not, the headlines are spinning stories about how Pierce Innovations strong-armed smaller companies, and Ms. Rose's name is floating around as a victim of your ambition. Logan clenched his fists. "It wasn't that simple. We had 1,000 deals in play, Harding. I never aimed to hurt her specifically." Harding eyed him with skepticism. "Whether it was intentional or not, the damage is the same. You need to figure out how to handle this before Ms. Kwan and the rest of the board decide you're a liability." Logan felt his jaw tighten. "I'm on it," he said. "The last thing I need right now is another scandal." As soon as Harding left, Logan picked up his phone and dashed off a message to Trinity. "We need to talk face to face. I swear I didn't know you were affected. Please, let's discuss this." No reply came. With each hour that passed, the story spread further. Rumors rippled through the company about Logan's questionable ethics in those early years, fueling gossip that perhaps Caldwell had orchestrated the leak. By late afternoon, Ms. Kwan requested an emergency meeting to reassure investors, and Logan had no choice but to scramble, half-focused on damage control while waiting desperately for Trinity's response. When he finally stepped into the boardroom, Ms. Kwan and several directors sat in tense silence. Wordlessly, they slid a printed copy of the old contract across the polished table. A red circle had been drawn around Logan's signature. "I want to hear you defend this," Ms. Kwan said coldly, "because from where I stand, it looks like your personal interests cost Ms. Rose her future once, and now you're tying her startup to ours? It was years ago, Logan began, trying to keep his voice steady. That particular merger, yes, I signed for the company, but I didn't personally manage every detail. My oversight was limited. Ms. Kwan cut him off. If you're expecting me to believe you had zero idea Ms. Rose's firm back then would be displaced, you'd better come up with more than just your word. Investors want a CEO who's fully accountable. Logan felt trapped between his own uncertainty and the board's mounting disapproval. He thought about Trinity, imagining how she must feel reading through that contract. Every line must have felt like a personal betrayal. I'm not excusing anything, he said finally, forcing his gaze around the table. I'm acknowledging that our practices may have been flawed back then. I regret it, but I'm taking steps to make it right, both with Ms. Rose and our stakeholders. Harding gave a skeptical huff, and Ms. Kwan pursed her lips. We'll expect concrete solutions by tomorrow, she said. Otherwise, we might have to consider new leadership. Logan kept his composure until the door closed behind him. His mind spun with the possibility that he could lose everything: his position, the company he'd poured his life into, and any chance of rebuilding trust with Trinity. The two issues felt tangled together in a disastrous knot. He rushed to his office, phone in hand, and tried calling Trinity. Straight to voicemail. Another attempt. Nothing. Tension pulled taut in his chest. He needed to see her, to explain what had really happened, or at least to ask for her help in unraveling the truth. He left a voice message. Trinity, please. I never intended for that contract to hurt you. Let me explain. I'm so sorry. Evening shadows stretched across the city skyline by the time a single message popped up from her number. Come to my office, now. Logan wasted no time. He left the building, ignoring staff who tried to flag him down with last-minute updates. Within minutes, he was weaving through downtown traffic, cursing every red light as he headed toward Trinity's modest but modern startup location. He found her waiting behind the glass doors, arms crossed, expression stone-cold. She buzzed him in wordlessly. Around them, the office floor was dimly lit, most employees having gone home. Only the quiet hum of computers and the faint glow of overhead lights broke the silence. She gestured for him to follow her to a corner meeting room, one with glass walls that overlooked the main workspace. When he entered, she slammed a thick folder onto the table. This is the entire paper trail I've collected since I first realized I was pushed out of the market. You want to know how I felt, reading your signature on these documents? As if everything I suspected was true, that you were so busy chasing your ambitions, you never bothered to see who got trampled. Logan's throat constricted. Trinity, you have to believe me. I signed 100 deals in those first couple of years. I was young, hungry for success, and blind to the collateral damage. I never knew your company was involved or that you were personally affected. Her voice wavered with anger. You left me, Logan. Not just personally, but you left me to handle the fallout of your decisions. I lost my shot at that time, had to start from the ground up somewhere else. And all this time I thought you'd simply abandoned me. I had no idea you'd also signed the document that forced me to leave town, to rebuild my life on my own. His eyes flicked over the paper in the folder. The terms were brutal, effectively clearing smaller tech startups from a specific market sector. Pierce Innovations had claimed resources, leaving no room for those with less capital. He met her gaze, trying to convey sincerity. I'm sorry, he said, the words feeling woefully inadequate. If I could take it back, if I could have done it differently, she exhaled, pressing her fingertips to her temple. You can't erase it, but maybe you can help me fix it, at least professionally. If we're really going to partner, I want absolute transparency. I won't tolerate being burned again. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I swear, I will do everything in my power to ensure that never happens. I'll stand up to the board, to Ms. Kwan, to Caldwell, anyone who tries to sabotage you. Or us. Trinity's posture softened a fraction, the fight in her eyes mingling with exhaustion. Us, she echoed quietly, as if testing the sound of the word. For a moment he thought he saw a glimmer of the bond they once shared. But before either could speak again, her phone rang, shrill and insistent. She checked the screen, brow creasing. "It's the twins' school," she said, startled. Answering the call, she pressed the phone to her ear. "Hello?" Logan watched her expression shift from confusion to alarm. Her eyes darted up, catching his stare through the glass wall, and he sensed something was very wrong. "What do you mean they saw the news? Yes, I understand. They're upset? Right. Of course I'll come." She ended the call, shoulders tensing. Looking at Logan, she swallowed. They saw some news story about you, about all this scandal. They're scared, asking questions. I have to go." His heart lurched, guilt mingling with protective instinct. "I'll come with you," he offered. Her hesitation was obvious, but the stress in her eyes suggested she might not have much choice. A frantic phone call from the twins' school. The children are upset, having seen news stories about their father. Trinity answers while looking at Logan through the glass walls. She's forced to ask for his help, whether she wants to or not. When Logan and Trinity arrived at the small private school, the front hall was uncharacteristically quiet. A few teachers stood along the corridor, throwing quick, concerned looks as the two entered. It was early evening, the time when most parents would have already picked up their children, and the fluorescent lights gave everything a stark clarity that made Logan feel even more self-conscious. The principal, a gentle-looking woman in a cardigan, stepped forward, relief evident on her face. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice low. Sienna and James were upset. They somehow saw the news stories floating around online. Something about Mr. Pierce. They've been asking a lot of questions. Trinity bit her lip, casting a guarded glance at Logan. "Can we see them?" "Of course," the principal replied. "I've kept them in my office so they wouldn't get more anxious." Logan's pulse pounded as they followed the principal down a short hall. Every step felt surreal. He was about to walk into a space where his own children sat grappling with the idea that he existed but had never been in their lives. Trinity paused outside the office door, taking a breath. She looked at him uncertainly for a moment, then pushed the door open. Sienna and James huddled near a small table stacked with coloring books and markers. Their faces lit up when they saw their mother, and they scrambled over to her. "Mommy," Sienna said, her voice wavering. "People said bad things." Trinity knelt to fold them into a hug. "It's okay. You're safe," she murmured, stroking Sienna's hair and then James's. Her gaze flicked up to Logan, who hovered a few steps away, suddenly unsure of how to step into their bubble. James's eyes turned toward him, studying him with open curiosity. "Mommy, that's the man we saw on TV?" he asked in a small voice. Logan swallowed hard. He wanted to say something brave, fatherly, but his throat felt tight. Trinity glanced at him, silently giving him permission to move closer. He lowered himself onto one knee. "Hey," he said gently, "my name is Logan. He paused, the word father catching in his throat. "I'm a friend of your mom's." Sienna eyed him warily, hugging a plush bunny to her chest. "They said you did something bad," she blurted, referencing the rumors she'd likely overheard. Trinity cringed, clearly pained that her daughter had to grapple with gossip. Logan managed a soft smile. "I made mistakes in the past," he admitted, his voice gentle. "But I'm trying to do better now. Most of the things you hear on TV aren't the whole story." James inched closer, curiosity flickering in his dark eyes. "Why were they calling you mean?" Trinity opened her mouth as if to intervene, but Logan spoke first. "Sometimes grown-ups have arguments about money and businesses, and it can sound pretty bad when it's all over the news." He studied the twins' small faces, seeing the flicker of confusion. "What matters is that I care about you both, and I promise I'm not here to do anything that hurts you." Sienna clutched her bunny tighter. "Promise?" He nodded solemnly. "Yes, I promise." The principal stepped forward, giving them a moment. "They can leave whenever you're ready," she told Trinity. "I'll be outside if you need anything." A little later, the four of them, Logan, Trinity, and the twins, emerged into the school's main foyer. A group of curious onlookers had gathered. A few parents who recognized Logan from the news, an older teacher whispering to another. Trinity's face tightened, but she wrapped an arm around Sienna's shoulders and held James's hand. Logan walked protectively beside them, acutely aware of the whispers. When they stepped out into the dimming daylight, cameras flashed from the sidewalk. A handful of paparazzi had discovered their location, snapping photos frantically. James pressed himself against Trinity's leg, and Sienna emitted a frightened squeak, burying her face in her mother's coat. Logan's chest surged with protectiveness. He moved forward, shielding the twins. "Back off!" he snapped at the nearest photographer. His voice was low and firm, and for once the cameras backed away slightly, giving them room to hurry to the car. They all squeezed into Trinity's modest SUV, with Logan awkwardly fitting himself into the front passenger seat. She exhaled shakily, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I hate this," she muttered, stealing a glance in the rearview mirror where the twins huddled together. "This is why I never wanted any publicity around them." Logan's heart twisted. "I'm sorry," he said, feeling the weight of the media frenzy he'd inadvertently pulled them into. "I can try to handle the press. My PR team can—" Trinity shook her head. "We can't stop every camera in this city. The only real solution is to handle it privately and limit how much the kids see." She glanced back at James and Sienna. "I'm taking them home. You should probably come too. They need to understand what's happening." His breath caught in his throat. This was an invitation, albeit a reluctant one, into their lives, if only for the evening. "Okay," he said quietly. They drove through rush-hour traffic, the twins occasionally piping up with anxious questions. Trinity answered as best she could, her voice staying calm but tinged with tension. By the time they reached her apartment building, the sky was streaked with dusk. Inside, the living room was small but warmly decorated, children's drawings taped to the walls, a stack of storybooks on a short shelf. Sienna and James rushed to their room to change out of their school uniforms. Logan took in the intimate space with a sense of longing. This was the life he'd missed. He'd been so caught up in corporate ambition that he'd never set foot here or known what it felt like to be part of a family's evening routine. Trinity sighed, rolling her shoulders. "I need to make dinner," she said. "The kids are probably starving." "I can help," Logan offered. She studied him, arms folded. "You cook?" He almost laughed at how uncertain she sounded. "Not as well as I'd like, but I'm good at simple tasks. Cutting vegetables, stirring pots." He gave a sheepish shrug. "I'll do whatever you need." Trinity nodded, relenting, and together they navigated the cozy kitchen. He chopped carrots under her supervision, noticing how natural it felt to be side by side, even if the tension lingered. Occasionally she'd glance at him with an expression that was half wary, half uncertain. He suspected she was still waiting for him to falter. After a while, the kids emerged, asking excited questions about the day. Logan tried to keep his answers gentle and reassuring, explaining that the cameras were there because some grown-ups were interested in his work, but that it wouldn't change how much he cared about all of them. James seemed more curious, peppering Logan with questions about his favorite color, or if he liked building Lego robots. Sienna hung back, occasionally watching him with big eyes, as if trying to figure out who this newcomer really was. When dinner was ready, they all crowded around a small table. A sense of familiarity settled in, the kind that families share over an evening meal, giggling about a silly joke, passing the salt, fussing over whether the carrots were too crunchy. For Logan, it was as if the glossy skyscrapers and relentless pressure of the outside world had melted away, leaving only this warm, fleeting moment of normalcy. Once dinner was finished, Trinity ushered the twins to brush their teeth and change into pajamas. Logan found himself alone at the table, clearing dishes. He felt oddly at peace, in spite of the swirling chaos outside. Then Trinity reappeared, her voice soft. They asked if you'd read them a story. I told them it was okay. His heart gave a sudden thump. Are you sure? She nodded. It's just a bedtime story, Logan. Nothing complicated. Upstairs, the twins shared a small bedroom with 2 cozy beds. A nightlight shaped like a cartoon star glowed in the corner. Logan perched on a chair between the beds, while Trinity lingered by the doorway. He held a battered storybook Sienna had picked out, reading each line slowly and adding silly voices for the characters. James giggled at the dragon's growly accent, and Sienna hid under the blanket when the plot got a little tense, only to peek back out with a grin. When the story ended, both children seemed calmer, their eyes drooping with sleep. Sienna mumbled something about wanting to see if Logan was back tomorrow. James tugged on Logan's sleeve. Will you come again? He asked drowsily. Logan's throat felt tight with emotion. If your mom says it's okay, he managed. I'd like to. Once they were finally asleep, he stepped out into the hallway, finding Trinity waiting there. The overhead light cast a faint glow that caught the hint of tears in her eyes. She quickly blinked them away. Thank you, she said, her voice low, for being gentle with them. He rubbed the back of his neck. I wish I'd been here sooner, he admitted. I'm realizing how much I've missed. Trinity looked like she might say something more, but a sudden buzzing from the living room broke the quiet. She disappeared to answer the phone, and Logan drifted after her, lingering by the doorway. From her clipped tone, he guessed it was about the corporate fallout. He heard her trying to assure someone that the partnership was still secure. When the call ended, she turned to him, looking exhausted. Apparently, Ms. Kwan is furious that you ignored her calls all evening. The board is threatening to walk away from the contract if we don't finalize soon. She sighed. I'm trying to hold the line, but everything is about to blow up. Logan's thoughts churned. If Ms. Kwan withdrew her investment, Pierce Innovations would face a crisis that could drag Trinity's startup into the mire with them. He exhaled, feeling the day's weight bear down on him. I'll handle her, he promised. I can't lose this deal, not after everything we've gone through. They stood there, tension thrumming between them, the quiet of the apartment contrasting sharply with the high-stakes corporate war raging outside. Finally, he checked his phone. 12 missed calls from the board, 6 from Ms. Kwan, and a dozen messages. He muttered a curse under his breath. The cost of redemption, he realized, was turning out to be steep, but for once, he was determined to see it through. Late that night, when he finally left Trinity's apartment, Logan climbed into his car to find a new text message waiting on his phone. It was from Caldwell. Your move, Pierce. By tomorrow, it's all over. Logan stared at the screen, adrenaline flooding him at the threat. Morning arrived in a flurry of urgent phone calls and tense whispers. The first rays of light had barely touched the glass facade of Pierce Innovations when Logan stepped into the lobby, a folder clutched under his arm. Trinity was already there, pacing near the reception desk, her face set with grim determination. Around them, employees glanced over anxiously, clearly aware that something monumental was about to happen. The board members, Ms. Kwan among them, had assembled in a conference room on the top floor, waiting for a plan to quell the corporate firestorm. Logan drew close enough to see the strain in Trinity's eyes. I got your message, he said quietly. You have everything we need? She held up her phone. Emails, timestamps, testimonies, enough to prove Caldwell's been manipulating the narrative against us. Marcus found a chain of messages that shows Caldwell bribed a lower-level staffer to leak partial documents. He's behind those Pierce's secrets rumors, too. The tension in Logan's posture eased slightly. So we can expose him. She nodded. Yes. But are you ready for the fallout? Their conversation fell silent as Ms. Kwan and Harding emerged from the elevator looking impatient. This press conference needs to happen within the hour, Ms. Kwan snapped. "The media's already gathering outside, and investors are threatening to back out. If you don't fix this, Logan, consider our partnership, both with Trinity's startup and my funding. Finished." Logan let out a measured breath. "We're on it." They all filed upstairs to a large conference room overlooking the bustling city streets. Through the windows, Logan could see vans from several news stations parked along the curb. Cameras were being set up on tripods, reporters shuffled about, and a throng of curious onlookers gathered at the building's entrance. The spectacle was bigger than he'd imagined. A spike of adrenaline coursed through him, knowing everything: his company, Trinity's future, and even his relationship with his children, hung in the balance. Marcus waited at the conference table, sifting through printouts. The moment Logan and Trinity entered, he handed them a small USB drive. "It's all here," he said, keeping his voice low. "Emails from Caldwell's associates, evidence of hush money, threats to certain board members if they didn't toe his line." Logan clutched the drive like a lifeline. "Thank you." Trinity's eyes darted toward the hallway. "People will eat this up," she murmured. "But what about the twins? The more publicity we draw, the harder it becomes to protect them from the chaos." Logan placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, mindful of the watchful stares from the board members. "We have to end this once and for all," he said gently. "If we let Caldwell keep controlling the narrative, it'll never stop. I promise. We'll find a way to shield the kids from the worst of it." She studied his face and gave a small nod, her resolve bolstered by his steady gaze. Then Ms. Kwan cleared her throat impatiently. "Shall we?" she said. "The press won't wait forever." A few minutes later, Logan and Trinity stepped into the main atrium, which had been hastily converted into a press briefing area. Rows of chairs faced a makeshift stage with microphones. Photographers flashed cameras the moment the pair appeared, a cacophony of clicks and murmured questions filling the space. Logan walked to the podium, the bright lights stinging his eyes. He felt Trinity close by. Marcus and Harding flanked them, while Ms. Kwan hovered behind the cameras. The tension was palpable, a silent countdown to a public reckoning. Logan cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming," he began, forcing his voice to project calm authority. "We've arranged this press conference to address recent claims regarding Pierce Innovations, our partnership with Ms. Trinity Rose's startup, and the allegations of unethical practices." He paused, letting the crowd settle. "There have been rumors, half-truths, and outright lies circulated about our business dealings. Today, we'll set the record straight." Before he could continue, a figure broke through the gathering at the back, Vaughn Caldwell, dressed in a sharp suit, his expression smug. As he strode forward, reporters swiveled, capturing every moment. Caldwell raised a folder high, as if brandishing an incriminating weapon. "Logan Pierce is the real culprit," Caldwell declared, voice booming. "He's used hidden clauses in contracts to demolish smaller companies. He's betrayed people, like Ms. Rose, and only pretends he wants redemption." A wave of murmurs swept the crowd, cameras snapping in rapid bursts. Logan's jaw tensed, but he kept his composure. "Caldwell," he said, "if anyone here has skeletons in their closet, it's you." Caldwell's eyes glinted with malice. "Oh? Care to provide proof, or are you just slinging mud?" At that moment, Trinity stepped forward, her voice steady. "We do have proof," she said, her tone ringing with conviction. She reached into her own folder. "For weeks, you've been feeding partial documents to the press. Contracts that were signed years ago, but only the sections that paint Logan as a villain. You threatened board members who wouldn't turn against him. We have the emails, all traced to your office." A ripple of surprise moved through the reporters. Caldwell's smug smile faltered, but he quickly rallied. "Ms. Rose is desperate to save her failing startup," he sneered. "Of course she'd fabricate stories." Trinity's temper flared, but she held her ground. "My company is not failing," she said, "and these stories are no fabrication. Here." She handed a set of printed emails to the nearest reporter. They show Caldwell authorizing payouts in exchange for damaging leaks. You'll see the timestamps match each wave of scandal that hit Pierce Innovations. A volley of questions erupted, voices clamoring as reporters scrambled for a glimpse of the documents. Caldwell's face darkened. He hurled another accusation. She stole her technology from an existing patent. I did nothing of the sort, Trinity snapped. My startup's software is fully patented under my name. You've tried to buy or sabotage it for months. Logan seized that moment to speak. I've made mistakes in the past, he said, lifting his hands so the cameras could see his sincerity. Contracts I signed without understanding the full impact, including the one that harmed Ms. Rose early in her career. I was blinded by ambition. He drew a breath. But these recent scandals, orchestrated by Caldwell to serve his agenda, we have the records, the proof. He used those old contracts to paint me as a perpetual villain, distracting everyone from his own corruption. Reporters fired questions at Caldwell, whose confidence wavered under the barrage of evidence. One demanded, "Is it true you bribed board members?" Another shouted, "Did you threaten to release doctored documents to tank Pierce Innovations stocks?" Caldwell's face twisted in anger. "Enough!" he snapped, turning a menacing glare on Logan. "You want to blame me for your downfall?" Logan kept his voice calm. "I'm blaming you for orchestrating leaks, blackmailing staff, and hiding behind half-truths. The board is finally seeing the damage you've caused, to them, to Ms. Rose, and to me." He shifted his gaze across the room, meeting the eyes of Ms. Kwan and several board members standing near the back. One by one, they seemed to realize the extent of Caldwell's manipulation. A few even stepped forward, confirming they had felt pressured or threatened by Caldwell in recent weeks. Caldwell's composure shattered under the weight of collective condemnation. Fury etched into his features. He tried to shout above the uproar, but the reporters weren't interested in excuses. Cameras focused on Logan and Trinity, who stood side by side, united despite their complicated past. At last, Caldwell threw down his folder, scattering papers across the polished floor, and stormed from the atrium. The press swarmed closer to capture the final image. Logan, breathing heavily, shoulders squared, and Trinity, hand lightly brushing his arm in a silent show of support. A wave of relief crashed over them both as the crowd pressed in for statements. They'd exposed Caldwell's treachery, reclaimed a semblance of truth. Yet the tension remained, thick with unanswered questions about what came next. An enterprising reporter raised her voice. "Mr. Pierce, how will you rebuild trust with your family after so many betrayals?" Microphones thrusted forward. "What's your next step? Do you plan to take a leave from Pierce Innovations, or will you stay on?" At the mention of family, the cameras zoomed in on Logan's face. He froze for a heartbeat, painfully aware that Trinity and the twins deserved an answer just as much as the crowd did. The hush that fell was electric, everyone waiting for his response. Logan remained at the center of the makeshift press area, bright lights pouring over him while reporters clamored for answers. Even after Caldwell's exit, the air thrummed with tension. Everyone waited for his next words. Trinity stood a few steps away, trying to catch his eye. He glanced at her, saw a mixture of relief, lingering hurt, and silent encouragement shining there, and found the resolve to speak. "I've spent years chasing power and influence," he said, voice wavering slightly. "I hurt people, sometimes without realizing it. I was ruthless in my ambition. Today, I own my mistakes. But I also stand here committed to making Pierce Innovations a force for positive change. For my colleagues, my partners, and yes, for my family." It was all he could manage, but the statement seemed to satisfy the crowd's appetite for the moment. A final flurry of questions rose, yet the security team gently guided the reporters to disperse. Cameras flashed, shutters clicked, and in a matter of minutes, the atrium began to clear. The crisis that had brought them all here still lingered in the air, but the tone had shifted. Logan lowered the microphone, stepping away from the podium. Trinity approached him, her eyes locked on his. He noticed the subtle tremor in her fingers, a sign of how emotionally charged this day had been. "Let's go," she whispered. He nodded, weaving through the lingering onlookers to find a quieter corner. They retreated to an alcove near the elevators, away from the main crowd. Marcus joined them briefly, congratulating them on containing the chaos. "The board is going to hold an emergency session," he explained, glancing at Logan. "They'll want a formal plan for how we move forward. Caldwell's meltdown was just the start." Logan gave a tired nod. "Let them know I'll be there." Marcus left, leaving Logan and Trinity alone once more. She exhaled. "That was intense. Are you okay?" He ran a hand over his face. "Not sure," he said honestly. "I feel like I've been fighting battles on every front. But seeing Caldwell exposed, I needed that. We needed that." Her gaze softened. "We did." Then she glanced at the lobby doors, where a slim figure waited. It was Sienna, peeking around the corner with wide eyes, followed by James, who clutched a small handheld game. Trinity had brought them, hoping they could see, in some small way, that their father wasn't the monster tabloids painted him to be. A friend of Trinity's stood behind them, clearly having escorted the kids at a safe distance. "Mommy," James whispered, not wanting to break the hush of the polished lobby. Sienna just waved timidly, her eyes flicking between her parents. Logan knelt, opening his arms in an unspoken invitation. The twins shuffled toward him, uncertain but drawn by something in his open posture. "You two must be tired," he murmured, brushing James's hair back gently. Sienna hovered to the side, hugging her bunny. "I'm glad you're here," Logan added. Trinity watched them with an unreadable expression. Then she cleared her throat. "I was hoping they could at least see that you're not a bad person." She hesitated. "The board meeting probably won't be child-friendly, though." Logan stood, glancing down at his kids, then back at her. "You could take them home," he offered. "I'll deal with the board. After that, maybe I could drop by?" She started to protest, but James's eyes lit up. "Can we? Please, Mom?" The spark of hope in his voice tugged at Trinity's heart. "All right," she relented, "but we'll see how it goes." They parted ways. Trinity led the children out the front doors, weaving through the last pockets of lingering press. Logan watched them until they vanished into the crowd, a swirl of conflicting emotions swirling inside him: pride, relief, and the crushing awareness that he had a long way to go to truly be the father they deserved. Soon after, he entered a large conference room on the upper floor where the board had reconvened. The tension was palpable. Ms. Kwan stood near the head of the table, her arms folded, Harding and other directors on either side. An overhead projector displayed bullet points about damage control and future direction. Harding turned first. "That spectacle downstairs was dramatic," he said, his voice dry. "But it seems you managed to turn public sentiment in your favor, at least partially." Ms. Kwan's gaze bore into Logan. "We've lost a few smaller investors, spooked by the scandal. Caldwell's meltdown might buy us goodwill in the media, but we still need a clear strategy to rebuild trust. Our share price is unstable, and the market is watching." Logan drew a measured breath. "I'll accept whatever changes you require," he said. "But we can't just apply a Band-Aid. We need transparency and an ethical shift in how we do business. That means better oversight, real accountability. I'm prepared to share power, empower some of you to have veto or equal say on major decisions." A ripple of surprise passed through the group. For a man once known as a controlling CEO, this was a striking concession. Harding narrowed his eyes. "And the partnership with Trinity's startup? Does it remain a priority?" "Yes," Logan said firmly. "If anything, it's more crucial now. The technology is solid, and Trinity's team is essential to our next phase of innovation. I won't let Caldwell or anyone else sabotage that." An uneasy hush followed. Ms. Kwan let out a slow breath. "I want to see a formal plan, with a timeline and clear responsibilities. If you can produce that, and if your new ethical guidelines satisfy investor concerns, I'll stay on. Otherwise, I withdraw my funding." Logan nodded. Understood. He spared a look at Marcus, who stood at the edge of the room, ready with a laptop and a prepared outline. They'd spent the past few nights drafting proposals, anticipating such demands. By the end of the meeting, the board's mood had warmed. Harding shook Logan's hand with uncharacteristic sincerity. "I've seen you at your worst," he said under his breath. "Maybe now I'll get to see you at your best." Logan managed a wry smile, grateful for the tentative acceptance. Night had fallen fully by the time he headed to Trinity's apartment. A sense of relief warred with exhaustion as he climbed the familiar steps. She opened the door quietly, the apartment lights low. From somewhere down the hall, he heard the low hum of cartoons on a TV. The kids must still be awake. Trinity closed the door behind him. "How did it go?" He shrugged off his coat. "They're giving me a chance. A conditional one, but still a chance." She nodded, expression softening. "I'm glad." Sienna peeked around the corner, her big eyes lighting up. "Hi," she said shyly. James was right behind her. Logan knelt, putting himself at their eye level. "You're still awake?" Sienna nodded vigorously. "We had a snack," she said, pulling Logan's hand toward the small living room. James grabbed his other hand. Together, they led him to the couch, where a half-finished coloring book lay. The TV's volume was turned down low, the cartoon images dancing silently on the screen. Trinity watched from the doorway, arms loosely crossed. Her posture no longer radiated the guarded tension of before, replaced by a cautious hope. Logan sensed it too, a shift in the atmosphere. He sat with the children, answering their innocent questions. Sienna asked if the cameras downstairs were scary. James wanted to know if Caldwell was the bad guy from the news. Logan did his best to explain without fueling their nightmares. Eventually, bedtime rolled around, and Trinity guided the twins to brush their teeth. Before heading to their room, James paused. "Dad," he said softly, the word sounding so strange and new on his tongue, "will you read us a story again?" Logan's throat went tight, but he nodded. "Of course," he managed, swallowing the lump in his throat. Then, realizing the gravity of what James had just called him, he glanced at Trinity. She gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. He followed them into their bedroom, flipping through a picture book about a group of animal friends. Both kids listened with rapt attention, leaning against Logan's arms. He read each page slowly, savoring the rare and precious closeness. Trinity lingered in the doorway, her eyes damp with emotion. By the time the children were asleep, Logan's heart felt full in a way he'd never known. He quietly stepped into the hallway, where Trinity stood wiping the corner of her eye. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being here. For them." He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I'm not going anywhere. Not again." They moved into the living room, speaking in hushed tones about practical things, how to handle next steps, how to juggle schedules so he could spend more time with the twins, how to keep the press at bay. Yet beneath the practical was an undercurrent of something warmer, a renewed sense of possibility and hope. Eventually, Trinity walked him to the door, the soft glow of a table lamp illuminating her face. "You did good today," she murmured. "Really good." He managed a faint smile. "It's just the beginning, but I'll take it." She squeezed his hand. "Get some rest," she said gently. "We have a lot of work ahead, together." With a final, tentative smile, Logan stepped out into the night. The city lights twinkled under the starless sky. As he made his way to his car, memories of the day replayed in his mind. Caldwell's downfall, the board's grudging acceptance, and most of all, James's quiet utterance of the word "Dad." He slid into the driver's seat, hands resting on the wheel. A flicker of the old ambition stirred in him, but it felt different now, less about conquering and more about nurturing. He realized that, for the first time, he was truly ready to share the power he once hoarded, to open his heart not just to corporate success, but to a family that deserved every bit of his devotion. He thought about the life that might stretch before him, forging an ethical path for Pierce Innovations, growing Trinity's startup hand in hand, and coming home each evening to the bright faces of two children whose trust he had to earn every single day. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth having ever was. A last reflective thought emerged in his mind, one he would carry into every boardroom meeting and every family dinner from now on. I once believed conquering the business world was everything, but real success is coming home to the people who trust you with their hearts and earning that trust every single day.
If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.